right. Welcome to Keyword Crypto with Michael and JJ. And today we have Bryce Weiner. Bryce, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
We've actually been trying to do this for the last hour, and finally we've got recording happening. So we're all warmed up and ready to go.
Yeah.
For the last half an hour, we've been talking to Bryce about how he uses stories. I'm not going to call them conspiracy theories. I'm going to call them stories. How he uses stories to teach people how to get into crypto. And I want to talk about that. And then when we're done talking about that, I want to talk about Tau and what you're doing now in crypto. But to start, I want to use this story that you most recently posted on Twitter, which is your thesis of Bitcoin maximalists will be responsible for war with Iran.
All right. Well, all right. Thanks for having me on. What the one of the things that I do with my feed is use narrative and storytelling in order to teach crypto, like you said. And because if you try and come at it directly, people kind of fog over a little bit sometimes. And in order to illustrate how Bitcoin is becoming integrated more into the macroeconomic picture, I started a thread on Twitter that sort of outlined how Bitmain brought Bitcoin into this macroeconomic picture through the investments in SoftBank. So when we look at the big portfolio, SoftBank is a Japanese bank that got $100 billion of Arabian money and then invested it in U.S. companies. And there's specifically tech companies like Uber and DoorDash and WeWork, and also Bitmain. And
Bitmain is?
Bitmain being the largest mining supplier and largest single miner in the entire cryptocurrency space. Like, they mine everything.
Right.
And they, we being the industry at large, especially, the segment of the population that identify as maximalists, were very opposed to the Bitmain IPO, and folks, took credit for killing it because they harassed it so much and exposed confidential information.
Yeah, why were they opposed to this? Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to be clear.
Well, it kind of stems back from SegWit and the block size debate and things that transpired between maybe about 2013 and 2016, when there's a balance in the ecosystem between miners and exchanges and folks who just use the currency but developers were never really a part of that power balance. And during what SegWit did was introduce the power of developers for governance over the Bitcoin network, because Bitcoin, every single block is approved by a miner. So if a miner wants to make a change, and especially if most of the miners want to make a change, that's what's known as consensus, and then the network changes. So these were changes that were being enforced by developers on miners, and miners initially didn't want any of this because it was destructive to their profit margins long term. And there became this animosity between miners and the Bitcoin core developers, which through several missteps by both sides, I guess we can say there's fine people on both sides of the argument, it just degenerated, and now it's outright hatred. And most of Bitcoin core, it works for Blockstream either directly or indirectly, and Blockstream just opened up their own mining farms, because specifically for the fact that, if you want to make protocol changes and you're not mining Bitcoin, you don't really have much of a shot at doing so. And for the, folks like me, we were shocked that Blockstream could make such a tremendous error.
You
And
said folks like you. Who are folks like you?
folks like me, altcoin developers, essentially, because we also work with the Bitcoin code base, and they don't like to talk about us, but there's a lot. The Bitcoin code base is forked into several different branches, all of which have very, very subtle and nuanced changes that it's a shitcoin, blah 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 blah. Most altcoin developers these days don't pull downstream updates from Bitcoin Core. We're doing all of our own development, and not because we particularly have a reason to, other than the fact that most altcoin developers have not signed on to the Bitcoin Core development pathway.
So Bitmain started doing things in their own way,
Yep.
and
Well, not in
and
their own way, but like
and
Bitmain is Jihan Wu, the guy that founded Bitmain and was its CEO for forever and ever. He is one of the biggest believers in Bitcoin. I mean, he founded this company and took great risk to build a mining company based on this risky technology that was only 2 or 3 years old at the time when he formed the company. And now it's this enormous multi-billion-dollar multi-global monster, and probably the single largest employer in the entire industry.
so SoftBank, Japanese bank, gets money from Saudi Arabia to invest in these tech startups. One of them being Bitmain, another being Uber and DoorDash and WeWork. And these IPOs fail. And one of the reasons that Bitmain fails is because of Bitcoin maximalists, is what you're saying, right?
Right. So you take money out of a country and they invest in your company, and with the expectation that there's an amount of risk there. You might go IPO, you might not. But the expectation is that, if you build up and you have all the right moves, that your investment portfolio, more often than not, you will IPO and you will see profit and get that money back and then some. Now, SoftBank has had real problems. WeWork ate up a tremendous amount of money. A bunch of other startups, if you look at SoftBank's portfolio, we named some of the big ones, but there were a lot of failures in there. And we contributed to that failure rate. We must recognize that even if it was $100 million out of $100 billion, well, we all have to own it. Rise or fall, we're all kind of in the same boat. So, if maximalists are being obnoxious and damaging the industry, then we all tend to take a hit. We're not so advanced yet that we can say, hey, it doesn't matter what happens to Bitcoin, none of us are affected. Maybe someday. I'm working really hard for that, quite honestly. But because I think they're neck-bearded idiots. But I'm. It has to happen. It makes the entire industry anti-fragile, and we
So
can't be
just to
centralized
push
around a
back,
single network. No, go ahead.
just to push back a little bit. The only thing I would say in contradiction to that is that I feel like the only people who have any fucking clue what Bitmain is are the people who are on Wall Street and probably like Fidelity mining Bitcoin themselves. And I mean, I feel like they're smart enough to understand that this was a fork that was contentious, and Bitmain is one of the biggest backers of this fork that is contentious and kind of bad for Bitcoin itself, the name, just the name Bitcoin, because I don't know a single person who probably understands any of that and thinks about it in those terms. So, like, I agree with you in the sense of like it's bad for us long term, but I feel like it's bad for us community wise, not necessarily financially wise, because I feel like the people who would care are so heavily invested, they're not really going to care.
Well,
I mean,
it's for if you're a watcher of the space, this is sort of like a canary in the coal mine, because you
okay,
have to look at the health of the industry at large. And we don't really know much about, and we try to ignore, quite frankly, any data that isn't on a blockchain. However, things like hirings, firings, new company starts, mining production, that sort, how many miners that they sell actually get turned on and used. None
Yeah.
of these, we don't know what these stats are. There's no way to really collect some of those stats. And as a result, some of the most vital statistics that we would be able to use to discern the overall health of the industry simply aren't there. So that, excuse me, adds a certain amount of not only risk, but quite honestly, information asymmetry. Because if you're a mining company, you know exactly how many miners you've produced. You know exactly
Yeah.
how many you've sold. You know exactly how many are in use. Because, these people turn them on. I don't know if you realize this. Every time you turn on a miner and you don't configure it, the first thing it does is call home. And it starts mining Bitcoin on the company's pool. And that's part of
Gotcha.
it. That's part of the testing process. Like, they fire it up and test it for like 5 minutes before they put it in a box.
Yeah.
But what it does is it allows them to know how many of these miners in the wild actually get turned on.
That makes sense.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get back to this story of like, so Bitmain. What's Bitmain's relationship to Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash? We haven't even established that yet.
Well, okay, so Bitmain gained its bad reputation with Bitcoin maximalists as a function of SegWit and the entire block size debate and the future of the development path of Bitcoin. And if you showed up in 2017, you may not be aware that any of this actually transpired. But there was this enormous debate in the industry over the path that Bitcoin should take in the future. And miners were on one side and the developers were on the other. And you can't say that the miners lost. That would be a mistake. However, the developers won. And they won in the sense that they were able to force through protocol changes that essentially reduced the amount of profit potential for miners. And in doing so, what the miners responded by forking Bitcoin and creating Bitcoin Cash. So Bitcoin Cash actually replaces the value that Bitcoin Core removed from the network, which is why Bitcoin Cash has a lower hash rate, and it doesn't need a higher hash rate, quite frankly. And also and it's why it's still supported, and even Jihan was selling miners and accepting Bitcoin Cash for them. Because now there's a bit more to the story, because of course Jihan was dumping stores of Bitcoin in order to replace it with Bitcoin Cash, and people were making all kinds of hay out of that. But there was never enough information in the public sphere to determine exactly how much Bitcoin Jihan and Bitmain owns. And they've been mining Bitcoin as the number one miner in the world since 2014. So there's a significant portion of Bitcoin that can be owned by Bitmain, and we have no idea how much they've sold or how much they haven't. We know what they've told people, but we don't know if that's anywhere near the truth. I don't think it is. I think the numbers are way too low.
Yeah, I'm going to hazard a guess and say that most of our listeners got into crypto after the Bitcoin Cash fork, but there are probably some that remember that as, a really tough time in crypto, and that August of 2017 when that happened. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is how much of that debate was based on identity and not actually technology, and not actually anything that was changing about crypto at the time. It was more about the tribal warfare that we see in crypto today, that we see still with, BSV and Bitcoin Cash and all these things, and how even Jihan Wu was thought of as some sort of, at least for a little while, was a villain of crypto, like Roger Ver became, even though both these guys, like you say, were heroes of crypto for so long.
Yeah, and also, and like
In
I
2000,
mean, I also want
just to kind of interject, I just to kind of throw myself in there. In 2016, I was the first, like a whole year before all that, before Bitcoin Cash was created. I was the first altcoin developer that said, I actually want to hard fork Bitcoin.
I remember you saying that. Yeah, I remember you saying that, and like that's one of the things that led to Tau, right? It's
Absolutely.
it's it's I think that the scaling debate is one of the most important debates we can have. And just, I mean, this is just anecdotal, but I hung out with my sister-in-law today, who happens to be on city council. She's the mayor of a city in California, and she said that her city council was there was something that they were involved with the city. I don't exactly know what it was, but when I was talking to her, I was zoning out, and then she said, and we both all ended up with $200 worth of Bitcoin Cash. And like, she said that, and I was like, what? Like, and it turns out that was, they had to make an electronic payment using a cryptocurrency, and they happened to choose Bitcoin Cash. And so she was asking me my opinion on whether that was going to be worth nothing in the future, or like her as a quote unquote no coiner, or a recent coiner, she was not assuming that Bitcoin was the one true crypto. She was thinking, oh, there's lots of different cryptocurrencies and we don't know which one to invest in.
Yeah. And that's, you bring up a really good point, because even and I've said this for years and years and years, all altcoins exist because Bitcoin maximalists are idiots. And that includes Ethereum. Vitalik Buterin was a prolific developer in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and he left and founded Ethereum because there was no way for him to be able to get his protocol changes through Bitcoin Core in order to enable all of the stuff that Ethereum does today.
Oh, I know. And
all of that could have been on Bitcoin. All of that money, all of that excitement, all of that attention, all of that development, Bitcoin could have owned all of that, except for the lack of foresight of the Bitcoin Core developers.
Well, and to go back to what you said about, developers versus the miners, I mean, what percentage of miners even understand the code? Because I remember reading an article.
All of them.
That really? Because I remember reading an article last year that said that somebody found a bug in the code that would allow somebody just to print Bitcoin at will, but they didn't tell anybody, and they just went to all the miners and they said, you have to update and start mining this new chain. Can't tell you why, but you have to do it. And they all did it. Every single one did it.
Well,
none of them knew why, because they're like, oh, we're going to trust this coder.
No, it's not that none of them knew why. It's because all miners have a similarly vested interest in the perception of Bitcoin security. And if there is an event which damages that perception, it could damage the long-term investment. You got miners. I used to own a mining farm, right? And I don't know if you've never owned a sizable mining farm. It's a humongous investment in time, and not just money, but time. And if you are not only mining Bitcoin, but you're also at industrial scale, but you're also producing miners, then you've got so much money invested in Bitcoin's success that you don't want anything to happen that could screw that up. So if someone tells you, if someone, like a core developer, for instance, tells you that a bunch of folks agree that this is a problem and you need to update your code quietly, here's the fix, or otherwise we could lose faith in the entire ecosystem and all of your investment is shot to shit, you will absolutely update that code with no questions asked. And
yeah, but you see how easily how easy it would be to manipulate that?
I see. Yeah, I mean, I do understand that your point in that there's a code review process that is to a very large extent obscured in Bitcoin, and that's been one of the strongest criticisms of the last couple of years. Is of course the Bitcoin core development. Oh, they like to claim there's all hundreds of thousands of people, but that's crap. There's like 7 people that decide what the protocol does, and there's like 400 people that make like QT updates, but and like spelling corrections.
And they brag because they had one put get like one line of code get pushed through. It's like, yeah, I'm a developer, I'm a core developer, and it's like, oh, yeah, it's great, it's exciting, but like at the end of the day, I agree with you. It's just like there's a handful
it's pretty
of people.
Centralized for Bitcoin.
Yeah,
dare I say it,
for something with that big of a market cap. Yeah.
Here's an entire industry that preaches decentralization, except the price is centralized around a single network. Like the Bitcoin price is a single point of failure for most of crypto right now, and that's ridiculous. That's utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous.
So how would you get around that then?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. So let's talk about that for a second, because that's really important to this show. We're skeptics of crypto, even though we're fans of it too. And you're saying that price is a single point of failure. What do you mean?
Because it's called. This is a concept built from the early days of Bitcoin, when people first started to understand what the network was and what it did. And it's called the crypto death spiral. And a lot of the security of Bitcoin is dependent upon its monetization and the price. So, and the easiest example, the most accessible example of that is the price goes up, it's worth more money, so it's more valuable to mine. Therefore, more miners show up. Therefore, the network becomes more secure because there's more people mining it. Therefore, the price goes up. That's the positive spiral. That's called the positive feedback loop.
Right.
The opposite of the positive feedback loop is the death spiral, where people lose faith in the network, the price drops, miners turn off their equipment because it's not worth it to mine. They start losing money by running the equipment, and the network begins to slow down. You see, that's a real. Once the death spiral starts, it's done. It's over. There's actually a point. I think it's about 30%. If Bitcoin loses 30% of its miners, the block time shoots up to like 13, 14 minutes consistently, and it stays that way for 3 weeks.
So most people listening probably have an unwavering faith in the number go up theory of Bitcoin, that eventually it will. Even if it goes down 90% of its value, it's going to go back up again. In fact, I kind of believe this myself, even though I have my doubts about Bitcoin. But you're saying that if it hits that 30% fewer miners, we could enter a death spiral that actually destroys Bitcoin completely.
Yes, and that's a function of the fee market. The transaction
the fee market.
Your transactions will begin to expire in the memory pool, and they won't make it in the blocks, because as the length of time between blocks increases, the mempool starts to backlog at the same time. So it takes longer and longer and longer for transactions to confirm, and we'll have transactions actually start to fall out of the mempool. And if that's an important transaction, so for instance, if you're buying something through BitPay and you go to buy it and it falls out of the mempool, well, then your transaction for that purchase never completes.
So explain how a transaction would fall out of the mempool.
Yeah.
There's a time limit for how long back when Bitcoin was originally conceived, you could just fire off a transaction with zero fee, and eventually it would get included into a block. Well, then, I think it was Peter Todd came up with, this is when they started massaging everything towards this lower block size. The first component of this lower block size was the fee market, where now you have to pay a fee or your transaction might never be included in a block. So after, I think initially they were stupid about it. They set the expiration time at like 72 hours. And the mempool backlog was naturally pushing transactions out after 72 hours, and that was no good. So they increased it to like 2 weeks. So you can have a mempool transaction actually exist for 2 weeks. The longest I've ever had one stay in the mempool was 4 days.
Yeah, what was the longest for you, Michael?
Probably like a day or two, and that was in 2017 and 2018.
Yeah.
It was less than a day, because I was only using Coinbase Pro, and Coinbase Pro was usually really good at pushing stuff through fast. It would still take a couple hours, but
and I've got to say, I am like smiling so big right now because I love talking about how to destroy Bitcoin. I don't know why. It makes me just so excited because there are so many idiots on Twitter and on YouTube just that love to, like, you know, gather followers by saying how Bitcoin is going to change the world. And you know, it will, but I feel like just following crypto blindly into the future is such a dumb thing to do. So when we talk about blood in the streets, I get really excited. So
and at the very center of Bitcoin and in the center of crypto is this enormous like mountain of bullshit, and we all to a degree pretend the mountain of bullshit isn't there. And there's enough people standing in front of that mountain of bullshit, and there's enough money flowing around outside that mountain of bullshit that nobody notices the mountain of bullshit is even there. And the whole point is to grow the industry large enough so that that mountain of bullshit is insignificant and it doesn't matter. So when you talk about like number go up, why does the number go up? And they'll give you like some nonsensical Austrian economic scarcity kind of nonsense. Right. But that's not actually how it works. If you actually do the computations, and people have done this, do the computations for what is the value of a Bitcoin based upon its use and the transaction velocity and all that kind of crap, it's really like it's about $3,000 right now, about $3,500, and all of the price above that is Tether. And I know people like hate that and they want to disagree, but
I love it.
But I watched. I've been in this industry forever and ever and ever, and I've watched the markets forever and ever and ever, and I've lived 100% on cryptocurrency since 2014. So I'm not, there are certain things I will and will not listen to. And when your entire economic well-being is based on a particular market, you learn how that market works, and you make sure you understand how it works. And that's why people like me went apeshit over the Tether printer, because we knew exactly where that value was coming from, and it was coming from thin air. And so instead of the industry getting bigger, what the mountain of bullshit got bigger. And that's bad, because we haven't increased the amount of the industry to compensate for the amount of bullshit that we added. So that entire number go up philosophy is based essentially on a lie. And it's now become an institutionalized lie. So you have folks like Blockstream and the core supporter chorus and of course the Bitfinex supporter chorus as well, and that's thousands of people when you add it all up. And there are some of the most influential folks in Bitcoin, and that's how this continues. That's the bodies around the mountain of bullshit trying to make everyone pretend it's not there.
Oh, man.
So can you circle back to the mempool again? Because I asked about the mempool, and I kind of got you sidetracked. But so you said that there could be an important transaction and it could just get lost.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, if you put in a low fee, and of course everyone says, well, you got to attach a fee to it. Well, that's what the fact that you now have to attach this exorbitant fee is what has destroyed the commercial applications and the retail applications of Bitcoin, and that's where the whole store of value meme came from, because they realized that the fee market and the limited block size and SegWit all created this effect where Bitcoin was no longer usable. And so they had to come up with a new narrative, and that's where the digital gold garbage came from.
That's where this podcast was born, by the way.
Yeah.
Basically, from us not being able to move our Bitcoin because the transaction fees were too much, and like even owning a hardware wallet and having different options for fees was like, what the fuck? How does this supposed to work? Because like. I get to choose how fast my Bitcoin moves. And that doesn't seem to make sense if you're trying to create something that's going to bank the unbanked. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, shit. What was I going to say? I totally forgot. Oh, you mentioned Peter Todd. What did Peter Todd have to do with all this? Because if for our listeners who don't know, Peter Todd is a Bitcoin core guy, and he is one of the most anti-Ethereum guys on the face of the planet. To this day, I feel like every time I go on Twitter, he's calling Ethereum a scam and saying it's the biggest scam in history.
So if you work with cryptocurrencies and you actually develop them and stuff, people will come and knock on your door, and big companies. I mean, we've all done it. For several years, my income was consulting with very large banks, which are now rolling out their own crypto projects on what this stuff is. And Peter Todd did the same thing. He wrote like Corda for R3. And the first thing Peter Todd does is he gets contracted to help work on one of these networks, and then he turns around and tears them apart from a technological and cryptography perspective. So kind of like highlighting how bad they are. Now, he's just a dude. Like he's just some like pasty white guy who happened to be at the right place at the right time and is good at math. Like he's not anyone of particular great moral standing or anything. In fact, quite the opposite apparently. But he's just he just codes. He's just some guy. The only reason why any of us know who he is because he's got a big mouth and he writes code. Kind of like the rest of us, really.
But you said he had something to do with the original fee structure?
Well, yeah, he created two particularly important changes to the protocol that were introduced as a soft fork known as replace by fee, RBF, and child pays for parent, CPFP. And essentially what that means is if you send a transaction into the mempool and you didn't put enough of a fee in it, like if there's a surge, like surge pricing, you can replace your old transaction with a new transaction. That's all. That's all it did.
How would you know to do that?
You don't. In fact, it's only implemented in very few wallets. And it's such a terrible feature that most wallets don't use it. Oh, it's awful. It's terrible.
So you mean there's features of Bitcoin that are so bad they're not even implemented in wallets? That's great.
Well, and it's not that they're
part of the shit mountain.
It's part of the mountain of bullshit.
No,
it's
it's right.
going to be the title of this episode for sure.
Because and child pays for RBF and CPFP were created specifically to solve an edge case problem with the fee market, which was what happens if you during a surge where you send your transaction and then suddenly 50,000 other transactions come along after you. Well, you need to up your amount of fee, so the way you do that is RBF, CPFP. And that was...
But you would have to be competent in the chain to understand that was even happening, unless you got some alert from a wallet saying, hey, by the way,
first of all,
surge pricing, do you want to update your pricing?
Well, okay, so it's like, hey, it's been 3 hours, why hasn't my transaction cleared? And in order to use RBF, you have to have a wallet that supports RBF. Yeah. Or so it's like if you sent for instance, like Edge Wallet, if you're using Edge Wallet and you send out your coins, that doesn't support RBF. I don't think. So you can't replace by fee on that wallet. And most
Do
mobile
you even
wallets
need
you
that
can't
anymore
hardly have.
with SegWit?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Man.
Absolutely.
All right. Should we trash Lightning Network while we're at it? That sounds.
Yeah, that's what we do here.
Well, okay. So when it came to trashing Bitcoin, I stopped when Lightning, when the very first time that they said Lightning would be ready for use in 18 months. That was it. I threw it. I said, you know what? You could make a career out of criticizing Bitcoin, and a lot of people have, quite frankly.
Hey, that's our show.
That's our
See,
show.
there you go. And I'm not even hating. I'm saying they make so many shit, awful decisions that I call them janitors. Like you don't they didn't design Bitcoin, they didn't make Bitcoin, they just clean it up and make sure it stays working. So like, do you let a janitor design an addition to your house? No, you call an architect. You call someone who knows how to plan an addition to a house. And unfortunately, the recent additions to Bitcoin have been made by the janitors.
Oh
and
man.
and Lightning is so top heavy and requires so much to be able to use that it's like a fool's errand. They're tilting at windmills. It'll work
Yeah.
someday, don't get me wrong, but someday. But it'll never work at scale. It'll never deliver on the promises. And I think even not too long ago, the guy who invented Lightning said exactly the same thing. Like, this will not actually work the way people think it will.
And some
Yeah.
people are like holding on to it as like this is how my investment is going to be worth in the future.
No, it's not. Someone's
All
going to have
right.
to replace Tether.
I want to talk about how your relationship to the music industry. How'd you get there from crypto, or were you there first? I mean, you've been a computer developer, you've been a computer programmer for a long time.
Well,
What's your relationship to music?
like most people, I don't do just one thing. And and I started programming when I was a kid. And I mean, when I say I was a kid, I mean this is like 1990. And when I mean, it was a way to pay bills, but it really sucked. Like, even back in the 90s, programming sucked. And it wasn't a very good job. But it paid well, it just wasn't a good job. And I wanted to find something else to do, and I like smoking pot. So I got involved with the marijuana legalization movement, because back in the mid 90s, there was, marijuana was still totally illegal everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you get involved in the weed movement, you end up running into musicians. And I started a production company that threw outdoor weekend pot concerts. So, Friday through Sunday, you go out and go out in this field and we'll play a bunch of music, and we'd have some vendors, and you camp out and everybody just get high. And it was fun. And it was actually pretty profitable. And I made a lot of friends in the industry. And then I got married and had a kid and had to grow up and had to get a real job. So I went back to my programming skills and got a corporate job and went that route. But I always had one. I was even for in between there. I was even a DJ at a local an FM station in Cincinnati, and then another one in Dayton, Ohio, and did like afternoon drive time. And I loved. I mean, I love everything about the music industry. It's insane. It's crazier than crypto, and it's like 400 times bigger. And like crypto insanity, I exist in this industry without losing my brain, because I already lost it dealing with the music industry. It's absolutely, it makes crypto like look crazy.
I mean, I'm from the music industry as well, and I'm sort of new to this little tiny niche industry of crypto, and I feel like I'm playing in a little pond is when I'm here having a podcast. So then Tao, what is Tao, and how does it
So
relate to both?
so when I kind of got into this, I was like, yeah, this is great. And I had some stuff I had to go take care of in my personal life, so I didn't really like jump into it like everyone else did. But around 2013, I had the opportunity to say, okay, I can do anything I want with my life. What do I want to do? And, I kind of took a long personal inventory for a few months and decided that I wanted to revive some of my music industry connections and use that as my reason to be in crypto. But I never told anybody in crypto. This is one of my favorite, like for 4 years, I'd never told anybody who was backing me or who my friends were. I just told people I always had like friends, quote unquote. I know people, and I never told anyone who they were. And then it became obvious around 2015 or so, about halfway through that period of time, that the technology had finally matured to the point, and I had done enough of my own experimentation with it by that point, that it was ready for the music industry. And things like we could begin to really explore things like rights management and payment streams and the ability, partial ownership of the rights to a song.
This is something I want to pause for a second, because this is something I feel like in crypto, when you bring up, oh, we could use blockchain for this, a lot of people see that as a red flag, like, yeah, that's a bunch of bullshit, or there's a lot of hyperbole there. But you have to understand
4 years ago, you could use blockchain for all of this. And the only reason why in 2019 it's like, yeah, shut up, is because for the last 4 years, we tried everything. And so I mean, I started out by going to the RIAA, and I called in a favor and got a meeting with the CTO, a guy named David Hughes. He actually became our first advisor. And he was like, Bryce, I'm gonna tell you something, and I'm gonna tell you two things, and these are the most important things anyone's ever gonna tell you. I said, okay, David, what? He says, number one, no one is ever gonna give you any money to do this. He said, number two, nobody cares about anything but selling records. That's it.
Well, I just want to explain, like, we talk about Bitcoin and crypto as, oh, it's going to replace a bunch of systems. In the music industry, and this is an example of almost all intellectual property, we are using a financial system that is left over from a bygone era. So when you create some music and you sell that to somebody, you basically are trusting them to use it a certain way, and they're going to pay you for that use. And back in the day, you'd have to actually loan them a record to play, or you'd loan them the sheet music, and you could get paid you would get paid for sharing the license of either one of those. But now we live in the digital age, and you can just share music however, and you can steal music however. And so there's no real standard for us.
That's not true. No.
Well,
Hold on. And you raise a really good point. And the problems with the music industry and the way that we've attacked the problems, or have tried to attack the problems, are because of a slight misperception in how we got here. And you have to go literally back like 400 years.
400 years?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. To the printing press, to when the printing when the printing press was developed, because it was when the printing press was first developed that you could actually mass produce sheet music for the first time in history, and that's when you actually got music publishing for the very first time.
Right.
And all of the problems that existed 400 years ago with that printed sheet music exist today with digital music. You have piracy, you have copyright infringement, you have every single problem you have today, you had 400 years ago. None of them have ever been solved because you can't. And it's after 400 years, we can throw in the towel, especially after crypto. Like, okay, this is just something that, because of the way art is and because of the way finance and money work, that it's just never going to be a clean sort of process. It's never going to be something
some people
like that.
believe that crypto and blockchain can solve this problem. I don't
Some
think
people
that
are
it can.
idiots.
I mean, I don't think that it can, but it can. I mean,
Some
so
people believe the world is flat. So
an example is, eMusic, which is a company that is a digital music distribution company that owes millions of dollars to artists and record labels. And they're saying, hold on, wait for our blockchain to come out and we're going to solve the problem and then pay you all back. And
Yeah,
it's
they're going to
kinda
solve the problem by socializing the losses by us doing some bullshit ICO, and then taking the ICO money to pay their debts. It's pretty obvious what it is. I mean, it's ridiculous. I know exactly what company you're talking about, and
You do,
quite
yeah.
honestly, oh yeah, and quite honestly, I hope the SEC takes them to court, and I'm quite sure they will. That is so absolutely transparent that there's no way that'll ever happen. No way.
So what is Tao doing then?
So understanding that it's not a straight line, I kind of went at it orthogonally, is the phrase that I use to describe it.
Or orthogonally, okay.
Orthogonally, where you come at a problem from a seemingly unrelated angle. And I started with the premise that if crypto is going to help the music industry, which is very risk averse and controversy averse, like they don't want any kind of controversy that they don't create. And with that be, so you can't have things like Silk Road. So the whole aspersion over Bitcoin, that it's used for nefarious purposes, literally makes it unacceptable for most mainstream use cases. And that's been a big thing. We try to ignore it. We don't want to talk about it. But I have to tell you, it's the whole reason why Tao exists. Because and we got people to use cryptocurrencies using Tao that refuse to use Bitcoin because they don't want to get caught with Bitcoin on their phone by their boss or by their coworkers because they're going to get shunned. But if you have a different cryptocurrency which is launched by quote unquote good people, and it doesn't have any of the bad reputation of drugs or market manipulation or anything like that, that's a quote unquote acceptable cryptocurrency. So that was like number one. Like you have to get over that instantaneously. And in doing that, the second thing you have to do is, the most powerful aspect of cryptocurrency is making people money. So if you don't make people rich, or if you don't give them cash that they didn't expect they were going to have, then they're never going to get any more interested in crypto, period, in a sense. So we actually kind of planned it out. We know how hype cycles work because I've played with hype cycles for my entire career. And we hyped the coin so much between 2016 and 2017 that a lot of folks that made money, and they began to see the value in cryptocurrency without Bitcoin even coming into the equation at this point. But that was just the money. We were trying to do something with the data, but once people had the money in their hands, they would listen to us for about the other stuff. Well, so I got a couple meetings with some really great folks, one of which was a company called musicreports.com. And musicreports.com owns the rights to like 600 million songs. And, excuse me, they don't own the rights. They own the data of the rights to 600 million songs. So they know more about who owns what than anybody else on the planet. And they brought me in, and they sat me down in this big conference room, and they turned on this white, projector, and then showed me their databases. Like no NDA, nothing. They were so confident in what they had built. Like they didn't even bother with an NDA. And it was so complex, and it was so nuanced and so well developed. I became convinced, and this is exactly what they wanted me to see, but I became convinced after like 30 minutes that there is absolutely positively no way on the planet that any blockchain would ever be able to compete with what they built. Not ever. And I don't know if anybody else would ever be able to compete with what they've built. Like if they go public, I'm buying into that IPO because that's a company that's worth billions of dollars.
Because of the data the data behind the licenses. Wait, I don't understand what they own or what this company does.
So when you have a song, and I love this example. You've heard of the artist Nelly. You know, he did Country Grammar and a bunch of other songs.
Of course.
Okay, so he's got a song
Getting
called
hot in here.
There you go, right? He's got a song called Grills. Grills is a ridiculously stupid song.
Most of his songs are pretty dumb, yeah, but go ahead.
No, man, that's good. This is like the most ridiculous of his ridiculous songs. And it's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And of that 2 minutes and 45 seconds, there are 17 people who get paid. Rihanna has they use a sample of Rihanna's voice for a grand total of 2 seconds. No, 6 seconds, excuse me. They use it 3 times, 2 seconds each in that song. And she gets 1% of the royalties on that song. Just because for 6 seconds, and she didn't even sing, like they sampled her voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the complexity, and so you have like, not a record label will own something, and then the writers own a piece, and then the producers own a piece, and then if you own a piece of a song, instead of selling the song, you can actually resell the revenue. So it's called revenue redirection, and instead of you collecting the money like a lottery payout, you know, you go, or even better, like those guys that'll go out and collect on your medical judgments. So instead of getting a payout for 20 years, they'll come and pay you a lump sum right now.
Yeah.
And all of that information is stored in music reports. They're like the 500-pound gorilla of that kind of information.
So they've had a lot of funds redirected towards them. Is what you're saying?
No, back in the day, when you use a song, so like for instance, when HBO uses a song for like a theme song, right. Bad Thing is from True Blood is one of my favorites for this, because that song was like 10 years old. And nobody had ever heard of it before. And then True Blood used it as their theme song, and then instantly it's $1 million hit. Mm-hmm. When that happens, you have to pay everybody involved that owns those rights. Where do you go in order to do that? Well, there's all these complex sort of business relationships that have evolved over the years in order to get all of that done. Well, back in the 60s and 70s, it literally used to be guys like Harry Fox who would have like these Rolodexes, and they would go through their Rolodex and they would be like, oh, here's the song. Yeah, I know those guys. Here's who wrote it. Here's who produced it, blah, blah, blah. And it was literally written down on pieces of paper. And so you know, for the last 40 years, it's been automated and automated and automated and automated. And and music reports grew from one of those Rolodexes. And it just sort of this force of gravity over the last 40 years, it attracted all of this other data.
So how do they make money?
They make money by being the arbiters of that data.
So they do music admin in the industry, basically.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So like, for instance, Warner and Universal own so many albums, they can't manage all that data themselves. So Music Reports already owns it. So they just pay Music Reports in order to maintain it. They also do it for independent artists as well, but the core of their business are the major labels.
Yeah, I write theme songs, so I'm familiar with this stuff. I just want to make sure our audience knows what we're talking about.
No, absolutely.
So then getting back to Tao, this is all really, really good information, by the way. But I want to know what Tao does in this case.
Tao is sort of the tip of the spear for being able to participate in both industries at once, and in order to experiment. It's like the excuse to be able, because cryptocurrency has this tremendous attractive power to it. Even people who don't believe in it and who don't use it, feel compelled to comment on it. So Tao was always used No, I mean, great. Now we've done some great stuff with it. Like, I mean, just like it's a cryptocurrency. People spend it. Like we had one artist that.
People spend crypto?
Yeah, I know, crazy, right? Like, even with our low market cap and our low volume, it's still kind of liquid, especially in small amounts. So we had a band and they had what I call the ex-girlfriend effect. She found out he was cheating on her on the road. So she took an axe to a bunch of the band's equipment. So they lost like $5,000 worth of equipment, and they had a gig in 12 hours. So but they didn't have any money, but they did have some Tau. And we were able to make a deal with them we actually helped them get that equipment by agreeing to purchase the Tau on the back end from the music store where they were replacing their equipment.
How did they get the Tau in the first place?
We actually we gave it to a bunch of record producers. We cheated, basically.
Okay.
And I passed it out like candy. I gave out maybe like 500,000 tokens to various record executives, who then gave it out to, the people that they knew, and basically made it rain all over the music industry. And then eventually we would hear reports about people using it. Like, I needed money and I needed some emergency cash, and holy shit, I had this crypto and it saved my ass.
So you created a blockchain. And the transactional value was done through Tau, which is the unit of exchange on this blockchain. Mm-hmm. And you gave it out to people in the music industry to use as their economy.
Yep. And it actually...
So is it like a pre-mine?
Yeah, it's 100% proof of stake. So what I did was I mined out all the coins initially. Well, I didn't mine them out. I mean, I wrote the network, so I just coded it that way. And so I actually held an ICO in 2000, and I took a lot of shit for it because I was staunchly against ICOs for several different reasons. But in 2000, when you do a 100% proof of stake network, an ICO is the way you distribute and monetize the network for security purposes. There's no other way to do it. And I held the ICO. I capped it at $100,000 because that was the limit of security regulations at the time. So you can actually raise $100,000 without having to file with the SEC. Like, the SEC doesn't even care. It's not even enough money for them to enforce.
So you created Tau perfectly legally in the U.S. this way.
That's right. Oh yeah, yeah. I've done every coin I've ever created has been 100% legal under U.S. law.
Okay.
I know, right? No, that's
not hard to believe.
I know. People listen. I believe me. I get that all the time. And
Bryce Weiner has always played by the rules. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why. And people still don't really kind of connect that together with the fact that I literally went to the SEC offices in Washington, D.C. last year and sat there with like 14 of them in the room and 4 more on a conference call, and like literally like 20 lawyers from the SEC. And none of them had a single bad thing to say about my career or me or anything. Nothing. And they knew everything. They knew all the coins I'd ever done, even the ones that people don't necessarily realize are mine. And I was shocked. I was as shocked and impressed as anybody possibly could be, because they knew that I don't want to put it that way.
It's because they didn't follow your conspiracy theories on Twitter.
That's how you teach them.
So I actually, back in 2015, people were reporting me to the SEC so much for my actions, I actually started sending the SEC fruit baskets for holidays. Just because, it was one of those things, and it was actually the particular the person from the SEC that set up this meeting was one of the folks that I sent fruit baskets to, because it was literally that kind of relationship. Like, I love you guys. Like, I'm not doing anything wrong, and you're more than welcome to come and investigate me if you really, really want to. And I know these people are sending in complaints, but I'm not doing anything. And I to this day, I mean, I met with the CFTC in a similar manner. I even met with the Office of Comptroller of Currency, which is the Treasury Department. They actually decide who is and who is not a bank in this country, and I even met with them, and nobody said dick. And I've known my entire career that I was being 100% and completely legal under U.S. law, and I've never, other people have certainly questioned it, but I never did. And the SEC certainly doesn't either. And I'm not bragging. I'm not daring them to come after me because I don't have to. It's not even like that. It's like literally I understood the law and how this stuff works, so I just played by the rules.
So I want to know still, I don't understand what Tao has to do with the music reports and the music industry admin. Like, how does it factor in? I mean, Tao is a money and it can be used in the music industry, but
okay.
What are you doing with all that information?
Well, if you want to try and build a solution for the problems of the music industry with a blockchain, you should probably have a blockchain.
Okay, we got one. Tao, great.
Nope, there you go. And a blockchain needs to be monetized. So there you go. We went through being able to monetize a cryptocurrency is tough.
So how can you use the Tao blockchain to, how is it used besides as a money right now? Is there, like right now I do everything through ASCAP. Like ASCAP is a performing rights organization. They go and hunt for the royalties that I get. That's how I make money. It's like, how am I going to use Tao?
You're not going to use it that way.
Okay.
And you see, that was the thing. We explored all of those different, in fact, ASCAP is working with IBM. ASCAP was trying to build their own blockchain-based solution, and they gave up on it.
Well, my question is how am I going to use Tao as a musician, as a songwriter, as a music industry person?
You won't.
I won't.
You won't.
Okay.
And it's because music people don't care about crypto. So what we did was we built layers around the cryptocurrency to where it's hidden in the middle of the operation of the economic machine behind everything that we built. So it lurks in the center. So like our mountain of bullshit is Tao. And it's that economic machine that's built a community, and it's built this flow of money. And from that flow of money now, we're starting to fund artists and produce music. Can any cryptocurrency do this? No. And the reason is because you have to gain the trust of an entire industry before they will trust you with their careers. And you couldn't, even if you took the cryptocurrency out of what we're doing, and tried to do, and other folks have, those businesses collapsed because they went insolvent and they weren't practicing good financial management skills. So with cryptocurrency in the equation, this actually solves a real problem in the music industry of how to fund albums.
But is this license information now on the Tao blockchain? Is my question. Is like, what is it?
Nope, it's not worth it. Not worth it.
Okay, so you created Tao to generate awareness about what you're doing.
To an extent, well, not only to create awareness, but also to experiment. Well, I had a prototype rights management system built in 2016, and we abandoned it because it doesn't work. So we said, okay, so crypto is no good for that. So what's the next use case we can use for crypto? And I spent 6 months in Minnesota. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Minnesota's got a great music scene.
Totally. Yeah.
And I started to get to know some of the people in that scene. And one of the things they started to do were hold these house concerts. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept. But,
of course, house shows.
Yeah, where you get 20 of your friends together and they all bring like 20 or 30 bucks with them. And everybody pays like $10 to get in. And then instantaneously the artist makes $200. And all they do is play for like 20 people in your living room. It's so intimate. It's a wonderful experience, especially in places like Minnesota where it's cold 9 months out of the year and you can't go outside.
Yeah, my first band, the first band that I was ever on tour with, we did a tour where we would play anybody's party for $100. So that was
Yep.
basically it. You're
Yep.
describing the first tour I ever went on. But anyway, go on. This Minnesota. So Tao.
And that's where we got the idea of in combination with the 2017 boom of ICOs, I came up with the idea of tokenizing branding. So instead of using the rights to an artist uses their brand and puts their brand on a cryptocurrency. And it was really the fight between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash that started to crystallize this for me, because people hated the fact that it was called Bitcoin Cash, because that's why they started calling it Bcash, because using the word Bitcoin detracted from the actual Bitcoin branding. And branding was really the only fundamental difference between any two cryptocurrencies, really. They all do the same thing. They're
That's
all
true.
relatively quick. They all relatively do smart contracts and blah, 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 blah. And they all can all store data, whatever. But it's really in that, shit, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
Oh,
Minnesota. Let's go back to
oh,
Minnesota.
yeah. So, the branding of a cryptocurrency. So, I don't know if you remember Coinye back in 2014, but there was
Yeah, I
this
do.
altcoin. Okay, so it's an altcoin branded with Kanye West called Coinye. And Kanye sued the guy and forced him to change the network branding and all this stuff. So this is monumental for a few reasons. Number one, it was the first time a celebrity brand was attached to a cryptocurrency. Then number two, Kanye said, yes, you can legally attach it to a cryptocurrency, but no, you don't have my permission. And number three, a court told a decentralized cryptocurrency it had to change. And that was, this is like huge back in 2014.
But it wasn't truly decentralized. It couldn't have been.
Well, no cryptocurrency is.
Right.
Decentralization is happens in perspectives. There's no, you're either decentralized in development, or you're decentralized in governance, or you're decentralized in operation. There's some sort of trilemma that you can build of decentralization where you can only have two out of the three or three out of the four. But what we're looking at in this aspect, however, is the fact that branding is huge business in the music industry. When we talk about branding in the music industry, we talk about stickers and posters and T-shirts and everything attached to a celebrity that you can buy that isn't music. Even those like little Funko, dolls, whatever.
Right.
So that's all branding. And now, if you take a brand and apply it to a cryptocurrency, that's no longer a security. That's merchandise. That's a commodity. It's like a T-shirt.
Yeah, then it has value. Right.
Right,
Okay.
right. So I went to Congress last year. We developed the idea for most of 2017, and then in 2018, I went to Congress to lobby directly, personally, in order to preserve the pathways for commodities under legislation. Because at the time, in early 2018, the SEC was looking at Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as everything is a security. Prove to us it's not. So I did. And I did this by having the House Department on Agriculture have a blockchain hearing. And everyone said, what the fuck? Why is why is the Department of the Committee on Agriculture holding a hearing on crypto? Because the House Committee on Agriculture has set more commodity laws than any other committee in the legislative branch of government. They own commodity legislation. So if we get the House Committee on Agriculture to start commenting on blockchain commodities, that establishes the legal precedent for the arguments as far as regulatory enforcement. So, and in fact, Amber Baldet was, and this was like one of my like true Illuminati moments. Not only did I organize that committee hearing, I organized a congressional hearing. I picked the people who would speak, and I chose the questions that would be asked of them. Like and then during the committee hearing itself, I was actually right behind Amber. Like I was sitting there, just off camera. In fact, you could see my lawyer on frame. I made sure that I was outside of the camera. But that entire committee hearing, all of that was my doing. And we did that to establish blockchains as commodities. Like that's my one country. You know, if anybody asks me what the fuck I've ever done for Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a commodity because I exist. I did that.
Well, thank you so much. All right. We should probably wrap this up since we've gone on for, well, it's now over an hour. But it sounds to me like Tao was an excuse to experiment and explore blockchain and crypto in the music industry. And I think that's really cool. What do you...
I would have to say it's more than that, though. I mean,
well, of course it's more than that. But I want to know what you think its place in the future is going to be, or what's next for you.
Well, if you want to talk about, okay, so honestly, me and Tao, we like tied at the hip at this point. And the reason why is because, you know, if you look at the greater cryptosphere, the one thing that Tao is a 100% proof of stake cryptocurrency. It is a Turing complete blockchain, just like Ethereum. It has data storage capabilities, just like Bitcoin SV. In fact, it's even more data efficient than Bitcoin SV. And it has, and it's 100% proof of stake based on the Bitcoin source code. So it's actually the only 100% proof of stake coin other than Cardano and NXT that isn't run by some corporation or foundation where they raised $100 billion in order to launch this shitty blockchain. And people actually use it because it works. Like we have tinkerers that are building consumer devices out of Raspberry Pis and stuff because with a proof of stake blockchain, it's still cryptocurrency you can mint yourself.
But when I ask you how I'm going to use it, you say I'm not.
Well, as a musician, no. As a musician, you're not, unless you want to. And if you do, you know, how to put this. This is why I like talking about cryptocurrency and I like talking about our end product, because the way that it all fits together is this. I could talk for 3 hours about the ecosystem we've built. And so, like, I guess the easiest way to put it is we built a full stack cryptocurrency. We started with a blockchain, then we built an exchange, and then now we've built endpoint applications that utilize this entire ecosystem that we built. And it's completely independent from Bitcoin. It's clean. It has, you know, it doesn't have a bad reputation in the press or anything else. It has attractive economic parameters, and the entire community is focused on music and the arts. And I understand why that's really difficult for crypto to grasp, because everybody wants to compare it to Bitcoin or wants to compare it to Ethereum or Tezos or whatever the hell else shitcoin they have in their portfolio. But I built it this way, but so you can't. And the reason why I think a lot of folks are shocked when they look at the ecosystem that we've built is because we have stuff that projects that raise $20 million can't build and can't execute. And our market cap is really low, our volume is really low, and it doesn't compute in most people's heads how all that works. Well, it's because we don't pay for volumizers, and we don't, you know, have Russian mobsters pumping the price up and down so they can launder money through the networks. I mean, that's you know that's the way it goes.
It sounds cool. I want to know how it's going to impact my life as a person who is part of the music industry.
Okay, so here's what all of it has enabled. You see, it's not the cryptocurrency that's important. It's what the cryptocurrency has enabled. And this, when we talk about game theory, this is the culmination of that game theory, is that the cryptocurrency isn't directly necessary in order to use it.
I like that. Okay.
So what I built was and we're going to go live on Tuesday, is a platform called FanMix. And you can go, and if you want to make an album, you can raise money on the platform to make an album from your fans. So if you've got existing fans, you've already done the ground game, and you've built up your social media, and you play gigs and stuff, so you have a fan base. You can then appeal directly to that fan base to buy an album from you before you make it.
That's cool.
This is actually a model that works. There are other businesses that have tried this, except they were really terrible at financial management.
I mean, you could Kickstarter an album too, right?
You could. It doesn't really have the same kind of nuance that this does, but because this is specifically geared towards creation of albums and music in the music industry. So we kind of cater to artists in that sense.
Well, that's cool.
Now, where the cryptocurrency comes in the background, we have a referral code system. So if you help promote a band and then someone spends money, you get TAO. That's it.
And then you can spend your TAO on other merchandise.
Well, we have alt.market is our exchange.
Alt.market, right? Okay.
And we have cryptocurrencies, for trading against TAO base pairs. So you can actually take your TAO and buy Bitcoin or buy Ethereum or trade it for US dollars or even tethers. And so it's so when you say what is TAO, well, it's a cryptocurrency. And when you have it, it's like the music industry's on-ramp to the greater cryptocurrency ecosystem. And we didn't try and force it on them. We didn't try and make it this big, overt Rube Goldberg clockwork nonsense that nobody really understands how it works. We just built business on top of business until we reached a point where we could connect with the needs of artists. And through that, the common thread that built that bridge is the TAO cryptocurrency. It's there. You can't. And this is the thing about crypto that people don't get, is that it's the intangible, ineffable characteristics of cryptocurrency that solve problems, not the code.
I completely agree with you, and it's one of the reasons that I'm still interested in it. It's one of the reasons that we have this podcast. So,
folks just come in and hang out in the community just so they can learn how all this stuff works. Because I built TAO the same way that Bitcoin grew up. I was around. I mean, I like to joke that I'm Satoshi. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. But I've been around long enough that I've seen Bitcoin come up from nothing. And I built this ecosystem to reflect that.
So how many altcoins have you built?
More than anyone else on the planet. I don't think there might be like one guy in Indonesia that's made more shitcoins than I have, but I doubt it.
And your most popular altcoin at this point, what is it?
I would probably have to see, so for instance, Razor is dead, right? But Sunrock, Justin Vendetta, took the Razor code and made Verge. So
That's right. I was thinking about that. That.
So you're responsible for Verge?
Indirectly. And it was my code. It's his network, but yeah.
What about
he forked Razor?
There are some serious shit. Like, you didn't do No Limit Coin, did you? Is that yours, or was that?
I don't admit to doing coins anymore.
Okay.
like people have gone through, and I when I was on Bitcoin Talk launching coins, I would use 100 different names like everybody else did.
I see.
And people over time started to connect my projects together. So there's like a list of coins that I take credit for, but I don't put myself out there as doing stuff anymore.
That makes sense.
Unobtainium, I think, would probably be number 2. That has like a 5 exahash, 7 exahash hash rate. it's literally it's the hash rate for unobtainium is higher than Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV added together.
Unobtainium.
Yeah.
I love it. You're the king of shitcoins. All right.
Altcoin shitlord for life.
Yeah. The king of shitcoins and the mountain of bullshit will be the name of this episode. All right, Bryce. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show. I had a lot of fun. I mean, we talked for a while about so many different things. So hopefully you'll be able to come on again. And you talked about some of our guests. Vitalik was one of the first guests we had on this show. So yeah, that was kind of fun. Also,
he's a good kid.
He's a good kid. Yeah, definitely a big fan of Bitcoin.
Well, I met him back in 2015 at the Miami conference I was mentioning, and he was like 19 years old, and I just stood there for a minute like, this guy, really, this guy,
the future,
this guy, and it was obvious to me at that point that he had so many handlers around him.
Oh, really? Even then?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
well, what do you mean handlers? This is juicy. Like, what? You mean like he had people around him that knew he was genius and that they were gonna make sure whatever.
He was like developmentally challenged. Like he's got Asperger's or something. He's not a social guy. He's even melted down on stage a few times under tough questions. Like,
yeah, I mean that was apparent on our show. I mean, he was like, it was like talking to a computer. I mean, really nice computer, but kind of like that. Yeah. And in fact, if I asked a question, he would break it down into how many questions I asked, and then he'd go through them and answer them one at a time. Yeah,
no, exactly, and because that's how his mind works, and that's great. But you're not going to build something with like Ethereum with that kind of mindset. Like you have a dozen people around you that can translate between whatever it is that's going on in your head and
he's
the
very
rest
transparent
of the universe.
About that too. I mean, he's always been very, very clear that Ethereum was not his thing. It's built by many people.
Yeah, and it was his. I can't state this enough, that Ethereum exists because Bitcoin Core are a bunch of idiots. And if they just would have listened to Vitalik, then Ethereum wouldn't exist, and Bitcoin would probably eat the world. It would be well on its way to eating the world. But Greg Maxwell didn't want to share the limelight because Vitalik he's a likable guy.
And now we've got Craig Wright changing it even more.
Yeah, well,
really curious what your opinion of that is too. But we should probably call it.
Let's save that for another one because this is getting.
Let's
just keep going forever at this point.
All right, Bryce. Well, have a good night. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see
thanks
you next
so much.
time.
Thank you, guys.
Brink of